If otherwise takes place in a different universe from Meanwhile, then which one is in
Universe Gamma?
Where?
Here!
Wait, hold on. Is it Gamma or is it Universe A? You know, the universe Farnsworth made? No, not the simulation, the other universe that the other Farnsworth made.
Besides, this place kind of feels like a bee, you know?
Look, regardless of the universe otherwise takes place in, it's explicitly distinct from Meanwhile. Which begs the question, how often are we watching alternate universes in Futurama? Sure, sometimes it's obvious, like anthology episodes or places like... And while those are good examples of explicit alternate Futurama universes, what I'm talking about goes so much further than that. During any given episode, we could be watching one of over 25 different Futurama universes. Now that number jumps up significantly if we also include anthologies and sub-universes like Cornwood or the various Paraboxes, but either way, it's certainly more than
Just the two.
I mean, Farnsworth himself has created more parallel universes than that, but we'll unpack that statement later. This video is going to set the table for a series that will eventually map the entire Futurama multiverse. Meaning, using a variety of anomalies as identifiers, we are going to file every single episode of Futurama into its proper continuity. I call it the Futurama Universe Complete Theory. You know what, let's not worry about the name right now. The point is, we have a long way to go. So I want to start by framing the nature of the Futurama multiverse. The way I see it, at least. Which is what this video will focus on. We're going to do that by building off of the three main universes established directly by the show. The Farnsworth Parabox gives us
Universe A.
Beast with a Billion Backs shows us Universe
Gamma!
and all the way down establishes that at least a portion of Futurama is simulated. But how do I know that Universe A isn't just a simulation that Yevo incorrectly called Gamma? And while that is possible, there's a lot of compelling evidence that says otherwise, including, well, otherwise, starting with the physical characteristics that makes each distinct. We know all three of these universes exist for the same reason too. Someone from outside the universe observes it, and eventually, someone crosses a boundary between universes. But the robot devil is in the robot details. So let's take a look at how these barriers work, and just who can pass through them.
Playtime is fun time.
Those robots, combined with tossing this koala out the window, shows us that the barrier between Universe Gamma and Yevo's universe can only be traversed by organic life. Hell, even basic technology completely breaks down if it does manage to cross over. Organic life, on the other hand, has no issue whatsoever passing through in either direction.
If Sklee came here, Sklee would skluffocate. No sklit.
To be fair, I only said it had no problem getting through. My point is, robots can't cross the universal rift in Universe Gamma. But they have no problem crossing the portal to Universe A. We see both shades of Bender jump through multiple boxes, not just their own, unimpeded. Doesn't matter if you're a robot, a human, or some sort of weird lobster man, you can get in and out of Universe A. Now you might see where I'm going with this, because in All the Way Down, Bender the robot is the only one who is able to move through the layers of the simulation. On the surface, it does make sense. And the episode does establish that because he's a robot and he's code, he can be downloaded into the simulation. But is he the only one that's code? When the Bender from the main layer goes down into the simulation layer, the professor tells him,
It'll be a one-way trip. There's no way of returning.
Meaning, eventually when the body of the main layer Bender reboots, it's not the original Bender occupying him. It's a Bender from a higher level of the simulation. Because if
It's Bender's all the way down,
then it's also Bender's all the way up. Presumably, the layer above the show layer is a simulation as well, and so on and so forth. That's the whole deal with simulation theory. Once one thing's a fucking simulation, everything's a fry-damn simulation. Farnsworth even concedes that the main show layer is more than likely a simulation. So if the crew is simulated too, why can't they also move between the layers of the simulation? They're technically code, and the technology to enter a simulation exists, and yet only Bender can move from this plane to another. Now, I do think there's a deeper reason why it's Bender specifically, but that's far down the line. For now, the point here is that each of these named universes have very distinct inter-universal travel. But now that we've introduced simulation theory, doesn't that just mean everything's a simulation? Well, only statistically.
What you got there, numbers?
I mean, I don't think so, because Universe A is a physical object.
this box contains our own universe.
That box isn't a representation of the universe. Everything squashes when it squashes, everything shakes when it shakes. It's physically inside that box. but ultimately it
Makes no difference at all.
So if it does help you to think of these as distinct simulations rather than separate universes, that's fine. Either way, the disparities go beyond these visual trappings. These universes, simulations, dimensions, whatever you want to call them, have different continuities. To show this, let's start with Gamma, because conveniently, Beast with a Billion Backs isn't the only episode that can be directly connected to Universe Gamma. While Futurama is known for its attention to detail and certainly has its continuous elements, it's rare for the show to have an explicit previously on lead into a fresh episode. This does of course happen, in the movies specifically, which isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about between the movies, which is unfortunate because it's confusing for no reason.
And I bet it's gonna get a lot more confusing.
Honestly, there's high potential for that. Even when the movies are undivided, there is still a last time on in between two of them. The series has very few instances of this, and we'll talk about the others later. But I want to focus on Bender's Big Score and Beast with a Billion Backs because they are the longest directly connected sequence of events in all of Futurama. With the knowledge that we aren't watching the same universe in every episode, these 178 minutes of confirmed and named continuity are invaluable in our mission to map the multiverse. It's especially fortunate because Beast with a Billion Backs actually doesn't really tell us a lot by itself. Bender's Big Score, on the other hand, might be one of the most important episodes for this endeavor. It's a proverbial limestone cavern full of Bender's worth of references to Futurama's history.
Are you Philip J. Fry or not?
But those callbacks create a bit of a problem, because despite its name, the paradox correcting timecode actually leaves a lot of paradoxes uncorrected, and every single one of them revolves around
Handsome Lars and his fabulous jars.
Lars is gonna need his own full video. He could very well be the progenitor of Universe Gamma, but we're not talking about where these universes came from so much as we're connecting universes to episodes. It's a relevant question to be sure, and we'll get to it eventually, just not in this video. The important thing for now is the fact that he is not corrected by the universal timecode at any point in the movie. Now, when every other duplicate we see throughout the movie is killed, it looks like something out of Final Destination. This is just not the case with Lars. He makes a choice and actively sacrifices himself. Like I said, Lars needs his own video. He's a time duplicate of time itself, so there's a lot to unpack there, but for now, I'm not interested in how he died. I care about how he lived, because he did so for 12 years in the 21st century, and he did it explicitly as Philip J. Fry, which is where the anomalies start to crop up. Take Michelle, for example. We see her frozen in her cryotube after Fry finally becomes Lars and uses said tube to return to the future. In that very scene, Lars kicks off a huge chunk of hair from Michelle's head. But in the original Cryonic Woman episode, no such hair chunk is missing. Are we expected to believe that her hair just magically grew back while she was cryogenically frozen? Absolutely laughable from this so-called sci-fi show.
Say nerd! Nerd!
Can you imagine if I was going to try to build an entire argument off of that petty bullshit? I'm not petty, I'm pedantic. And holy shit, am I about to get way more pedantic about this, because my issue here has nothing to do with Michelle's head. That's just a red herring. Sorry, but the problem is the fact that Michelle was frozen before Fry turned into Lars. From this Michelle's perspective, Fry was alive and well when she was frozen, but the Michelle we see in the Cryonic Woman is well aware that he was missing.
I didn't know what had happened to you. No one did.
Now, it is possible that the first part of her statement is true. If she never tried to find him or didn't know that he went off on some Arctic excursion chasing some whale that, let's be honest, he probably fucked, right? Or tried to. At the very least, you know he thought about it. Come on, he's lonely, and we all know that dude's a freak.
I did do the nasty in the pasty.
I'm not condoning it, to be clear, but this is the same Fry that goes on to gaslight Leela into marrying him as Lars. That's not quite gaslighting. Maybe catfishing? Nah, it's not that either. Kind of like a combination of the two. Gas fishing, cat lighting, neither of those sound good. Cat gassing? Nope. Sorry, I'm getting away from my point here, which is, even if Michelle didn't know what happened to Fry, her statement that no one did is demonstrably false in the Gamma universe.
You want Uncle Phil? He went to the North Pole on a fishing boat.
See, even Fry's little nephew, Phil, named for his uncle to carry on his spirit, knew about the trip. Wait, just a second. How's he supposed to carry on Fry's spirit if Fry didn't go missing in Universe Gamma? I mean, his family probably assumed he died when his apartment above Panucci's Pizza exploded, but that happens in 2012, after Michelle is frozen, and after young Philip is named.
In honor of my little brother, who I miss every day.
In Universe Gamma, this scene simply would not have happened. Fry was around. The kid was still named Phil in this case, and the reason is likely that Yancey just prefers the name Philip.
I wanna be named Philip. Me, Philip.
But if you're paying attention, you may have noticed that I just used the same episode to make both of those points. We learned that Phil is named after his uncle in Luck of the Friarish, which means it can't take place in Universe Gamma. So why am I also using it as evidence that Yancey prefers the name Philip? Well, to answer that question, we're going to have to put a pin in Bender's big score for a moment and talk about the Farnsworth Parabox. The episode presents us with a lot of universes, but there are two main boxes it focuses on, A and B, or one, or the Fighting Mongooses if you prefer. Regardless of what you call the universes, the key difference between them comes down to the flip of a coin.
I flipped a coin to decide if I should proceed, but it came up tails, so I didn't.
But oddly, these coin tosses seem to have very little actual impact on the trajectory of, well, anything. That lobotomy changes nothing. Professor Mongoose still goes on to create Universe A in a simultaneous blunder. You'd think there'd be some sort of cause and effect relationship between some of the actions taken based on coin flips, but they're pretty much all just dead ends. Bender is gold, the professor has a head scar, but it's entirely cosmetic. How on earth are these universes only visually different? Think about it for even a second. Coins weren't invented in the 31st century. I don't know that people were flipping Lydian lions to make decisions back in 600 BCE, but even if they weren't, that still leaves 3,600 years of human history where every decision made by coin flip would be the opposite. What if somebody flipped a coin to see if they should flip a coin to make a decision? In that scenario, one of the universes would have an extra coin toss decision. The opposite side of heads or tails isn't nothing. It should be basically impossible for these universes to be even remotely similar, and yet they're nearly parallel.
All you created was my fist parallel to your face.
It's as if the butterfly effect just doesn't exist in the Futurama universe. Though we do already know this is the case when it comes to time travel. As I've explained in another video, Futurama's time is a deterministic, fixed timeline. Futurama's time is also Fry.
But that's not relevant.
The relevant part is if you go back in time and keyword try to change something, it doesn't have a cascading cause and effect. It doesn't really have any effect because you had already done that thing when it happened the first time in the past. Roswell, that ends well, and all that nonsense. If anything changes in the past and a gap in the universe's continuity is created, the events around it bend and close that hole. Like a sphincter, I guess? Or, a scrunchy.
1 year later, I gave Leela a diamond scrunchie, and we were married.
I call this phenomenon the scrunchy effect, not the sphincter effect. And it governs Futurama's multiverse and Futurama's time travel. Futurama's fixed timeline is actually timelines plural. Obviously, different universes within the multiverse are going to have differences. They have to in order to be unique. But for them to be recognizable, if they stray too far away from the fixed core, they get scrunched back into place.
1 year later, I got beat up at a Neil Diamond concert by a guy named Scrunchy.
But for this to be true, it would mean it's actually Universe A that's being scrunched closer to Universe B, implying that B is the core universe? Well, first off, movement is relative, so jot that down. The direction of the scrunch is irrelevant. Instead, we're looking more at what is being preserved with that scrunch.
We're married.
As I mentioned, nearly all the past coin flips we're told about in the Farnsworth Parabox are ultimately just cosmetic. Leela's decision to go on a date with Fry is the only coin toss that actually seems to change anything meaningful. But how does that work with the scrunchy rule I just described? Why would I name it that if the very example it's built around violates the rule? That would be stupid. Okay, so we're actually gonna have to take a quick step away from Farnsworth Parabox, but keep in mind, we're already taking a tangent from Bender's big score, which we also have to get back to. There isn't really a clean way to talk about the multiverse, turns out. First version of this was 28 pages long, over 70 minutes, and absolutely incoherent, if you're wondering why this video took so long. But this should be quick. The reason Fry and Leela are still married in Universe B is pretty simple. Not to be cheesy, but their love transcends universes. Universe B is one example, sure, but time keeps on slipping, autopilots the two into marriage. Divorce 2, fair, but still. A universe and otherwise ends with the two of them married. There's a single moment in time and meanwhile that contains the two of them getting married and growing old together. A simulated version of the pair ends the universe together. The fish versions of them defy nature to die together. These two will violate the laws of the universe to be together. And given who Fry is, it's actually quite possible it's not violating anything, and it is in fact part of the law of the multiverse. Or at the very least, the scrunched portion of the multiverse we get to see. Bringing it back to Parabox, this would explain why Fry A gets punched when Fry B proposes to Leela. Fry B is in better alignment with the multiverse. The universe expects Fry and Leela to be together, which is also one potential explanation for Leela being
The other.
What?
But that is definitely a completely different video, because we still need to get back to Bender's big score with this scrunchy effect in mind. Because if you recall, I was using the same episode to illustrate two contradicting points at the same time. If you forgot, that's cool, dude. I too spend too much time in Universe 420.
Get a job!
That episode was Luck of the Fryrish. In that universe, Yancey's son is named
Philip J. Fry, named for his uncle, to carry on his spirit.
Gets me every time. But in Universe Gamma, he has to be named Philip for a different reason, because Fry is still hanging out, presumably carrying his own spirit. However, Yancey hating his name and preferring the name Philip is not directly impacted by Bender's big score. So despite the fact that the events in the universe are different, the results are the same. They've been scrunched back into harmony. Now, I'm not going to go into every single scrunchy detail in this video. I am absolutely going to do that in another video dedicated to identifying every Gamma Universe episode. My point here is that the continuity of Bender's big score is scrunched together with episodes like The Cryonic Woman and Jurassic Bark in a manner similar to what we see with the Paraboxes, which does strongly suggest that they are in fact distinct universes. So that's taking a package on a long walk for a short drink of water that was ultimately the guy you were supposed to deliver the package to. But I'm stressing this because I'm going to be building the entire map off of this foundation. See, we're going to be talking about a lot of universes in this series. Some of them are in boxes, some of them are simulated, some might not be either, but all of them are very similar. In some cases, the scrunchy effect makes the difference nearly indistinguishable for the 22-minute span we're watching. Meaning, when we're mapping individual episodes, some will appear identical in multiple universes. Episodes where all the events have been scrunched together and there is no deviation from the properly locked Futurama timeline. That's all down the road. Hell, that is the road. It is a map after all, but we're still building the legend and identifying the destinations. There's a lot more to talk about with Universe Gamma, including its cosmetic differences from other universes, but I want to change gears because we're going to have to discuss all three main universes to do that, so I want to fully carve out the simulated continuity first. In All the Way Down, the professor simulates the Planet Express crew along with the entire known universe. I have my own opinions about simulation theory that you may have gleaned already, and you can also find in another video, but for our purposes, it doesn't change a whole lot, it just helps us generate another universe group that I've been calling Simulu. Because it's possible that the whole Hulu series so far has been a simulation.
Our universe is probably also a simulation.
As with everything, we'll get into whether or not they're all part of the same simulation, but it's at least clear that some of them are a distinct set, like we saw earlier with Bender's big score and Beast with a Billion Backs. In All the Way Down, the crew watches a simulated Fry play out his TV binge from the Impossible stream, which suggests that the two episodes could be part of the same simulation. However, these episodes aren't as directly connected as the movies I just mentioned. Meanwhile, the Impossible stream is actually directly connected to another episode. Well, meanwhile, the episode. But it's not the same meanwhile we've seen before.
It should rip us out of stasis back to the instant before I conceived of the time button.
It's left deliberately unclear when exactly in time that instant is, but it is by necessity near the start or possibly even earlier than the events of the episode. Depending on when the professor conceived of the button, it could have been years before he actually made the damn thing. Who knows? That's the point of the ending. But my point here is the moment we return to in the Impossible stream is made a lot clearer.
I offered to reset the universe to the instant before time stopped.
I don't know when Professor Farnsworth conceived of the time button, but we sure as shit know the moment time stopped. Down to the minute, in fact.
It's only 6:25.
Plus or minus about, 10 seconds. Clearly, the moment time stops is when Fry lands on the button next to Leela on street level. If the universe was reset to the moment before time stopped, this is the moment. And yet, in the Impossible stream, when it resumes, Fry and Leela are at the top of the Vampire State Building. The Meanwhile events we see in the Impossible stream cannot be the events we see in the true Meanwhile. On the other hand, we already know the main show layer of All the Way Down is simulated. And the events we see in the simulated version of the Impossible stream in that episode don't appear to conflict with the original version we saw.
So what you think you just explained to us is that—
Correct.
The Impossible stream is part of the same simulation as All the Way Down, and it's quite possible more episodes are too, even ones before the Hulu series dropped.
I just sold a castle to the King of Space.
But as with everything, we'll get there. Okay, I'm being a little flippant about the leap in logic I'm making there, but here's why I'm doing it. This would be a boring exercise if I just said every single episode was its own universe. The multiverse is vast enough, it might actually be the case. But I want to operate under the assumption that we're typically watching the same, if not at least a handful of linked continuities. This is Futurama after all, and we know some of these stories aren't entirely disparate. What that means is our core markers are going to revolve around the process of elimination. Universe A is the first we're introduced to, so that's what we're going to assume all episodes take place in unless we can prove otherwise. This will cascade through the universes we've introduced and the others we'll discover. There will also be episodes that don't fit into any universal category, but we're gonna have to cross that bridge when we get there because it gets complicated.
Antiquing?
This is why we didn't start with Universe A. It's going to be our default, with a bit of a caveat. See, Universe A isn't directly connected to another episode, so Universe A could possibly be its own thing. We don't have any explicit evidence of that either, though, which is all to say, I'm going to be calling the default universe of Futurama Universe Alpha, partially because it fits in with Gamma, but also to distinguish it ever so slightly from Universe A, just in case we find an anomaly down the road. Now, you may have noticed that there's a bit of a correlation between these universes and the networks they appear on. Universe Gamma is the first episode of the movies. The Impossible stream is the first episode of the Hulu run, and it's possibly simulated. Hell, even Rebirth starts with them passing through a wormhole. It could be a completely different universe from the Wild Green Yonder. Am I just overanalyzing the differences between networks?
Yes, it's sort of a Comedy Central channel. And we're on it now!
Well, would somebody who's overanalyzing things point out that when Kif boards the Planet Express ship in Wild Green Yonder, he's wearing his ceremonial white uniform, and when we see him on the ship in Rebirth, he's in his standard Velour Reds, and then go on to further point out that there isn't actually a continuity error between episodes because the error actually happens in Wild Green Yonder itself, because while he does board and is seen on the ship in his white uniform, in the very last shot of the movie, he's actually back in his red uniform?
Explain that!
Okay, I like a challenge.
Here's the problem. Going strictly off of the text, the scene in Rebirth is referencing the scene in Yonder where Kif is in his red uniform. So I mean, either way, it's cause for suspicion, but I'd want more evidence before definitively separating the two the way we've done with the Impossible stream and Meanwhile. Now, of course, if each run of the series is its own universe, that would be good evidence that the Wild Green Yonder and Rebirth are distinct. But that's just circular logic based on correlation, and if you think that's how thinking works, don't. That's not how it works. We need a lot more compelling evidence to make that claim, but we're not going to find it because the universes aren't based around runs of the show. As the map develops, that'll become more clear, but we can start with a direct example of what I'm talking about.
Everyone out of the universe, quick!
Remember when Nibbler just ate himself out of existence at the end of Bender's Big Score? It was straight up gone for all of Beast with a Billion Backs because, yeah, those episodes are connected and he doesn't exist anymore. But then, finally, in the next movie, Bender's Game, the crew finds Nibbler imprisoned by Mom in her crap factory.
This isn't a crap mine, it's a crap farm.
Is that really so much of a distinction?
Except I'm lying. That's not what happened. Nibbler wasn't missing at the beginning of Bender's Game. He was just hanging out on Leela's lap in the first scene of the movie. He was kidnapped later when Mom's sons, disguised as
owl exterminators.
We're owl exterminators. Ow!
come to Planet Express HQ looking for the anti-backwards crystal. So what the hell is going on here? Can Nibbler just teleport between universes by eating himself? Why would he forget that he spoke in Gamma if he literally yelled "get out of the universe" as he left? He would have to remember the context of his departure if he waited until the tear in the universe was repaired before returning, if that's even what happened. We have no evidence of that, and frankly, it's a bit far-fetched. How would he even know the hole disappeared? And why not return sooner, because clearly it wasn't as bad as he thought it would be? Alternatively, instead of all that bullshit, what if Bender's game doesn't take place in Gamma? Hell, half of it clearly doesn't, but the non-Cornwood half takes place in a universe where Nibbler didn't leave at the end of Bender's big score, but still forgot to blank everyone's memories. The scrunchy effect suggests that the Alpha universe and the simulated universes have their own slightly different versions of what happened in Bender's big score in their histories. If the Alpha version of the events involved Nibbler speaking and just not exiting the universe, it would explain why he's back in Bender's game. He's not back, he never left. Okay, it might seem like I'm glossing over the Nibbler of it all a little bit, because I am. Getting into what's going on with Nibbler opens up a crazy can of worms that is so large it will be its own video. The next video in this series. This Nibbler disappearing act is actually the initial thread I started pulling on when I started making these connections. As I started to pull, other anomalies started to crop up among other characters, and before I knew it, it changed my entire understanding of the Futurama multiverse. To be clear, the appearance, or absence for that matter, of a side character, even one as important as Nibbler, isn't necessarily a waypoint. More often than not, it tells us nothing. Just because we don't see Hyper Chicken in a given episode, doesn't mean that dipshit isn't off being a terrible lawyer somewhere else.
I'm sorry, I thought you was corn.
Because of the scrunchy effect, it's generally safe to assume that when we don't see a character in an episode, they're just off screen, simple as that. Honestly, it would be ridiculous to assume we're in a different universe where a character doesn't exist every time we don't see someone. We have object permanence. However, just because a character does appear in multiple episodes, those episodes aren't necessarily linked. Alternate universes often contain nearly identical versions of the same characters. All that said, in the next video, we're going to discuss all the times throughout the series where this is just not the case, and the ramifications of those differences. Don't worry, we're going to be focusing on trackable, important characters like Nibbler or Hubert, not something ridiculous like Sal or Randy. I want to wrap up this introduction by reviewing what we've already established because, I'll admit, it was kind of all over the place. The Futurama universe follows a static timeline. However, on a multiversal scale, those timelines have an elasticity to them because there's a proper equilibrium that these universes are scrunching towards. These universes have unique continuities that distinguish them from one another, and we have at least 3 of those continuities. We'll refine these a little bit, but so far, we've defined them as follows. Universe Alpha, the standard Futurama universe, or at least what we're calling the universe where Fry didn't live for 12 years in the 21st century. Episodes like Jurassic Bark and Luck of the Fryrish take place in Universe Alpha. Universe Gamma, also known as the Lars universe. Regardless of how it was formed, it's distinct from Universe Alpha not only in name, but also history. We know Bender's Big Score and Beast with a Billion Backs take place in this universe. Then finally, the simulation, which we know connects to All the Way Down and the Impossible Stream. We still have to determine if everything in between, or after, or before also falls into that category. And that's just the 3 largest universes. Eventually, once those rules are set, we'll start to identify smaller subgroups, and finally the episodes that take place in their own universe. If you don't think that's a thing, I present you any random anthology episode as evidence that it happens. And we'll be talking about regular episodes in that category too. I know it sounds like it's a lot to go over, and it is, which is why I broke it out into a series. We'll go piece by piece, however many videos it takes to figure it all out. Even if it can't be figured out. I mean, I did say from the beginning this whole thing was fucked. Anyway, thanks for watching, bye!